Well, welcome back once again to Talking with Tech. My name is Luke Stuber, joined today by Rachel Madel. How are you?
I'm doing so well, Lucas. How are you?
I'm good. I imagine you have better weather down there than we do.
It's so gorgeous today. I've been working all day, so I haven't been outside. I just went outside for lunch and didn't want to come back in.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're so excited to do the recording. So today, it's as we record, it's the day after St. Patrick's Day. And here in Portland, Oregon, there's always a big St. Patrick's Day marathon that runs right in front of our house. And so we couldn't get out of the house all day because of this marathon. And then right after the marathon ended, a train derailed right in front of our house. So it's been kind of a fun day. We haven't been able to get anywhere. But I think I could leave now, probably.
Wow, that's really intense. A train derailing. Is everyone okay?
Yeah, nobody was hurt. It was just a little cargo thing, only a few. But you don't really hear about that happening in this day and age. Well, whatever news aside, I'm really excited to share our interview today. So we have Lauren Enders coming on, who's one of these, just really great minds, I think, in our field. And not only a great mind, but somebody who shares, a lot of her knowledge with the community, which is awesome, right? I mean, that's what we need is more people like that. And I think we both have, sort of intersected with her here and there, as well as, of course, Chris, who can't be with us today, sadly. But I'm trying to think of some of the big stuff that Lauren has shared over the years. So she's obviously done a lot of stuff with Practical AAC, which is an awesome website. I highly recommend as a resource. But what else? So you had mentioned this AAC Boot Camp piece.
First of all, I love Lauren. If you haven't heard her speak, she's fantastic. Talk about a practical presentation. Every time I walk out of one of her talks, I have like new apps to try and fresh ideas. So I just love her. But yeah, she developed something called AAC Boot Camp. It's definitely all over Pinterest these days because Lauren's really active on Pinterest. I love her Pinterest page. But yeah, it's a really great resource for clinicians to print out. It just goes over kind of the do's and don'ts when you're working with AAC. And it's just it's a really great visual. And it's really easy to print out and to give to teachers and parents, and just kind of going over the cardinal rules of AAC implementation.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I like how you said that cardinal rules, right? So what are some of the things?
Yeah. Why I just said that is because I am actually presenting at Kasha on Sunday. That's a huge chunk of my presentation. It's the 10 cardinal rules of AAC implementation. So I think it's like on my brain. And I'm showing this visual because I feel like it's so powerful, and it's just kind of overviews basically a lot of what I'm talking about in my talk. Of course, the first one is modeling, which we've talked about a lot on this podcast, but it's literally the most important thing. We have to show users how to use their device, and not only modeling, obviously for the child, but I also, as a clinician, I need to show teachers how to model. And so I'm kind of modeling, which is like, I feel like I'm in the Matrix right now, but it's a huge part to kind of show. And that's something that I try to impress upon clinicians is like, we really need to show, not just talk about what to do, but just jump right in and show, teachers especially, and parents how to do it.
Perfect. Well, and when you're talking about teaching SLPs to teach teachers to teach kids how to model, then you're modeling, right?
I know. It's literally, we're in the Matrix.
we're getting recursive modeling. Right. So that's a specific visual that we're talking about. We'll get this up on the Facebook group as well. So you can always find us on Facebook. Just look for Talking with Tech. There's a page and a group. We'll make sure it's on there. But I'm glad you're talking about this in your talk too. So what are some of the things? We got model, presuming competence. I know that we've talked about quite a bit. Another thing she talks about that we haven't actually talked a ton about is prompting, right? So so there's a few different pieces here. There's prompt hierarchy, but then she's also addresses speed of prompting, right? And this is something that I've seen people, and I've made the mistake tons in my own practice, is making sure that you give enough time after prompts, right?
It's literally the hardest thing. It's because I'm a really fast-paced person. I have fast-paced therapy. I'm like, listen, we only got 50 minutes. I'm going to get in, and we're going to do as much as we possibly can. So So it's hard for me to slow down. And it's so important because 9 times out of 10, we're jumping in way too soon. And I can say that even knowing everything that I know, and I teach people this, but I still have to remind myself to stop jumping in so quickly. And I love this visual. It says wait 10 to 20 seconds with an expectant look before reprompting. And then she has in parentheses, count in your head, which I've done because it's so easy to just jump in, and 10 to 20 seconds is a long time. It's so long.
Oh, it's an eternity in that moment. Absolutely. But I've seen it happen, right? I mean, there was one situation I remember. It was specifically something around 30 seconds with a student that a lot of folks had thought was, simply not functional with his device, and then all of a sudden got a very functional, intentional response after 30 seconds. So
I'll, kind of present something and I might get distracted with talking to a parent or something else comes up. And then all of a sudden I get a response and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so long. But they were formulating a response and what they wanted to tell me. And also the idea of the prompt hierarchy. There's actually another really great visual by Rachel Langley. It's beautifully done. It kind of has green, yellow, red. You kind of want to stay in the green. And in the green, it's just not a high level of prompting. We're not telling kids to find a certain button or kind of giving explicit directions. Instead, we're just kind of waiting, just giving a facial expression or a gesture to tell them, we're expecting something right now, but we're not kind of leading them down with a high level of prompting.
Right. So what is the concept of the prompt hierarchy then? So the idea is that we start with a minimal prompt, right, before going to maximal, prompting, which can go all the way to the end of physical assistance, in terms of a maximal prompt. But the minimal prompt can just be that expectation to begin with, that silence, kind of presenting what we sometimes would call communicative temptation.
Absolutely. I'm the queen of really intense facial expressions. I don't say anything, but I just look at you what? Well, I don't know. What? So it's just something that I'm constantly reminding clinicians that I'm supervising. I've supervised CFY clinicians and speech therapy assistants. And I think we all could do a better job of, just pausing more and not jumping in and asking too many questions and all these things. But it's easier said than done for sure.
Yeah, right. Well, especially when I'm pretty fast paced in my therapy and my life too. So it's hard to wait.
It is.
One other one that she mentions that I think is great is the concept of babbling, right? So not shutting down this sort of purposeful play with the device. Is it something that you see in your practice kids doing?
I absolutely do. And especially when you first introduce a device. And I think that part of the problem is that a lot of the kids that I'm seeing are having assessments done and, clinicians are determining that because they're babbling and they're hitting all these buttons and they're stimming on the device, it's not functional. And I'm just the same way that babies, have to play around with language when they're first introduced to new words. It's the same thing with AAC. You put a new device with all of these buttons in front of a child, of course they're going to play with it. Of course they're going to hit the buttons over and over again and explore. I try to tell families that this is something that eventually with time, it decreases as they learn where all the vocabulary is and they get used to the device. But, the most important thing is that we never, remove the device. We never turn the volume off. That would be the equivalent of putting a piece of tape over a kid's mouth, if they were verbal. And so it's just really important to allow for that exploration.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think a lot of folks don't. I remember my way back in grad school, so many years ago, one of my first supervisors, I had the honor of having an AAC rotation with a really fantastic SLP. And there was a situation where a student's device was, taken away because they were perceived as being disruptive with it. And it was interesting because it was, this is a very level-headed, deliberate SLP who was, very calm most of the time, who became very, very angry when that happened. And the message was basically that you've taken this child's voice away. You can't do that to, any other, and obviously there are, some certain conditions and behavioral expectations around when you're offering conversation, but a lot of that developmentally is much further down the line in terms of acquisition.
Yeah, I had a similar situation just recently. And the client that I was working with on the device, she had the word cookie and she has diabetes and wasn't able to have cookies. So it was this big thing, like, we want to take cookie off the device. And I'm like, listen, I hear you. Like, she's asking for cookies all day long. Like, it's a problem and you can't give it to her. So there's a lot of kind of resistance. But we're just assuming that she's only going to use the word cookie to request. And, she might want to talk about cookies. And even if she does want to ask for a cookie all day long, that's her right. She's able to do that because, it's her voice. And it's so important to remember that we are the gatekeepers for what a child is capable of saying. And because of that, we can't decide, like, we're not God. We're not the people who get to decide you get to say this word, but you don't get to say this word. That's just the kind of therapy that I do not do. But it's just so important to remember that this is a child and they deserve to be able to say whatever they want. End of story.
Right. And as an adult, I can verify that sometimes the things that I talk about the most are the things that I can't have. Like
Exactly.
Yeah, talk about cookies. You can't have them. I feel like there's a ton of content coming up here. So without any further delay, let's get into it. So we're excited to present to you Lauren Enders and some tips about AAC. Well, welcome back to another episode of Talking with Tech, brought to you by the Speech Science Network. My name is Lucas Stuber, and I'm joined here today by my colleague, Chris Begay. How are you, sir?
I'm fantastic. So happy to be here. I'm so excited for who we're about to talk to.
I know, me too. So we have the incomparable Lauren Enders on the line today. How are you?
I'm great.
That's great. How's your weather out there?
It is better right now. We had a nice little ice storm. I guess an evening ago, and had a school delay yesterday morning, and I'm still skating up and down my driveway, but it's warmer than it's been, which has been absolutely frigid. So I'll take it.
Yeah, we had that too.
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, we had that too, because we're practically neighbors. Where are you exactly, Lauren?
I am in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. So I am kind of northwest. I'm terrible with geography, but from what I understand, I'm northwest of Philadelphia, about 40 minutes outside of the city, 45.
Okay. Yeah, that's why I thought of it. We don't always talk weather, but I was thinking of both you guys with what you've been going through right now. And
oh yeah, it's been
here
fun.
In Portland, we have a nice, consistent 32 degrees and drizzle. So,
all right.
If that's what you like, then that's what you got, and that's about all you got.
It's better than the 8 or 9 degrees we had last week.
Yeah. Well, we had a nice summer this year. It was a whole week. So that was neat.
Okay.
Well, Lauren, what do you do up there in Bucks County?
Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
Well, I am, my background is I'm a speech language pathologist. However, for the past, I guess maybe it's 9 years now, I am a full-time augmentative communication consultant. So I work in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and we have 13 member school districts, and I work for a county agency that provides special services like speech, language, especially groups like augmentative communication, assistive technology, vision services. So we have all kinds of services that we provide, and the school districts are able to contract with us if they so choose.
Awesome. So let me ask, were you like the first one? Like, how has this been a thing that has just been happening for years and years and years? Or are you like, do you know what I mean?
That's a good question. I actually am not the first one. My colleague, Bill Ziegler, who's been doing this for quite a long time, I'm not sure when they started the AT team, but he's been here for I forget how many years. I think he's got 40 years in, so I'm not sure if it's 20-some, 30-some at this particular, where I work for at Bucks County Intermediate Unit. There was a colleague that worked with him. He does AT for curricular access and computer access and access to literacy, those kinds of things. And then there has been historically a person that then also supports AAC. So he's primarily curriculum, and then he's always had a colleague that has done augmentative communication for years and years. It was Marie Mark. She retired maybe, I guess, 9 years ago or something like that. And then I had some experience doing staff development and augmentative communication and AT consulting. in my previous job at Delaware County Intermediate Unit. When I switched to Bucks County IU, it was a couple of years until Marie retired. But when she did, I took the opportunity to do what I love. So I became a full-time augmentative communication consultant. So we have had that going for a long time, but it has expanded recently in recent years.
That's great. And I want to comment too, if he's listening, Bill Ziegler, that's one of my favorite names of all time. Every time I hear it, I love it. So what are your, especially now that you've been doing this a long time, like how many students do you serve? What does that look like?
Gosh, I haven't counted recently how many students that I serve. The way that we work it in Bucks County, we have probably the largest assistive technology team in the state. We are very, very fortunate. There are 4 of us who do augmentative communication. There is Bill, who does full-time assistive tech, like I said, curricular access, things like that. But then we also have an audiologist on the team. We have an occupational therapist on the team. We have a vision therapist on the team. We have a hearing teacher therapist on the team. So it's a really large team. So we have 2 full-time augmentative communication consultants and 2 that are a couple days a week. And we provide services to the 13 member school districts in our county. And we just kind of break it up. We try to regionalize where, I might have these 3.5 school districts and somebody else has 2 school districts, or, depending on how much time we're allotted and how many, days a week we're doing augmentative communication.
So how does that work contracting wise? So, and let me, I guess, clarify, because I think it's different in different parts of the country, right? Like in Pennsylvania, when you say there's the school districts are based out of townships, am I thinking of that right? Like there's a town that contracts to
Well, each school district has their choice if they would like to contract with the intermediate unit for special services, whether that be assistive technology, whether that be speech and language, and they can do some and not the other. We have some school districts in Bucks County that they hire their own speech and language pathologists, but they don't have consultants or specialists in assistive technology. So then they contract with us for those particular services. So they can pick and choose, how they would like to do that.
Gotcha. And is the contracting like per student, or is it like, hey, whenever we need you, you're like on retainer, like a lawyer? Hey, we got to call in Lauren.
We are pretty much assigned, we're assigned to whichever school districts we're going to serve. I'm not even really sure exactly how they go about. I mean, the intermediate unit, our organization is the one that makes those contacts and determines, which districts we're serving for which services. And then the way that it works for a student that I might serve is that every student, when the referral comes through, the referral has to come from their LEA. So regardless of what school they're in, whatever their home district is, so that's the district that's going to be responsible financially for their educational services. If a teacher says, okay, this student needs augmentative communication, we really need some support from the AAC folks on the AT team, then we require the intermediate unit that I work for, we require that LEA submit a referral. We make sure that it's coming from the LEA, because then it's saying that LEA, that school district is aware that they are asking for our services, and that then they could be charged for our services. So it's all referral based. And then each of the referrals has to come directly from an LEA in that particular school district.
Gotcha. And so what does that consultant model look like? Like, what do you do as opposed to, let's say, a direct services from a speech language pathologist?
Okay, good question. So quite a number of things. It could range from, sometimes there'll be a request, okay, well, we already know what kind of device this kid's going to use, but we don't know how to mount the device. So it may be something very specific that I'm being asked to support them with. But in many, many cases, I'm supporting from the beginning. So a referral comes in, and then I say, okay, I'd like to come out and observe the student first, and then we initiate the set process. So student environment, tasks, and tools, Joy Zabala's process of, AT exploration. And we have a set meeting. We sit down and we talk about what we know about the student, the environment they're functioning within, the tasks they need to be doing that are challenging, the tools they're already using. Are they working? Are they not already working? And then, my big role in there is to facilitate the meeting, and then also to help with that last category of tools to explore. So I try to help synthesize what the team has shared with me about the student, the environment, and the tasks that need to be done. And then I say, okay, well, there's these features that that we know that the student needs.
I mean, I got it that the team gets together and you help facilitate the process by walking through, asking them questions that they answer to help come to that tools component where you do the kind of a feature matching chart. Is that?
Right. And then I'll suggest, okay, now that we know what those tools are, how are we going to get those? What's going to be the plan, and who's going to implement this trial? How are we going to take data? So my role is not only to facilitate that set meeting, but then it is also from anything from helping acquire the device, set up and customize the device, train, whether it be the speech language pathologist, the teacher, the OT, whoever is working with that student, implementation kinds of trainings, like teaching about aided language, why we need to do that, showing that, actual maybe going in and doing a group lesson where I actually go and co-teach so that they can see how I would model augmentative communication.
Oh my gosh, Lauren, I have 1,000 questions for you on everything you just said. All right, so let me start. Okay, the first question is, the team that meets, is it a school-based team or is it an IEP team? Meaning, are the parents involved, or do they get invited to this whole process from the get-go?
They do get invited. Good question again. So with the SET process, although the SET process is really a process for good thinking, a framework, so it's not an IEP process. So, it isn't that there are specific members that absolutely must be included. Beyond, we really have to invite the LEA, because at the end of a SET process, there is always the possibility after you do the trials that somebody's going to have to buy something. And we can't just spring that on a school district at the end. So, we really do require that at least the LEA be there. And generally, the teacher is at a SET meeting. The parents are always invited and welcomed and encouraged to be there. Depending on the nature of the student's needs, we sometimes might have an OT or PT there. If there are really considerable access needs that we need those folks there to give their input, they may be there as well. And of course, the speech language pathologist is generally needs to be there as well. But it's, it's not a legal process in and of itself. But we will then go in and revise the IEP to say that a SET process has been initiated and we are exploring technology.
One question I had, and this is based on my experience in Oregon, not only working in the schools but also in private practice, is the relative, decline of ESDs compared to school districts that are starting to take on their own AT responsibilities or hearing responsibilities or vision responsibilities. Are you seeing that also where you work?
We're not seeing a tremendous amount. We have 13 school districts. Only one of those school districts entirely has provided their own assistive technology person who then completely handles assistive technology. And then I guess they have some speech language pathologists that also are supporting AAC. So that one particular school district, they do provide their own supports. The other 12, in some form or fashion, will employ us. It just depends on exactly what they need. I've seen a little bit of movement towards, there's one more school district that I believe has hired someone who is starting to kind of learn the process. So, I don't know what that's going to look like in 5-10 years, whether that will become the norm where each individual school district will want to have their own folks, as opposed to using, a regional service agency like the one that I work for. Not really sure, but for now, we just came out of an assistive technology team meeting. That's where I was right before we started this podcast. And we were talking about, how we are incredibly, incredibly busy, all of us. So there is still quite a bit of need out there,
right,
specifically AAC related. We have so many new referrals, so many existing students that we're supporting. We're, modifying vocabulary or access method, or supporting teams where they're, I think, anybody that really is on the pulse of us augmentative communication knows that implementation globally, it can be very, very challenging everywhere.
Right.
And, we know that there's some reasons for that. And in my mind, one of the biggest is the lack of aided language, but that takes training and practice and I believe coaching. Right. And that's where it becomes, without coaching, we can do a training. We can have people come in and we can do a 2-hour training and explain why we need to do modeling and aided language. And but just like we can't expect them, the students, to learn without modeling, we really can't expect the folks in these teams to be supporting modeling if they're not seeing me model it. Or
what does an hour a week really do with us? What, as opposed to, the training and the coaching piece? Absolutely.
Lauren, let me ask, have you seen, once you've taken a team through this kind of consulting role, like even if it's just a set framework where they are choosing the tool and they spend the time figuring out what tool, do you find that there's been, they don't call you the next time because it's like, okay, we got it?
Rarely.
Rarely. They still want their hands like held each time.
I think there have been, I can think of maybe just 1, 2, maybe 2 or 3 teams or individuals who really just take it and run with it. In most cases, it's repeating each student. And some of that is because, each student is different. So while they may have understood how the process went, they're not really sure how to do the exploration. They're not sure what tools are out there. They're not sure. And again, because in many of these instances, I have not yet been able to do this coaching type of process, whether it, whatever protocol or method is used, they're not where they need to be in being able to support these kids. So that is the goal and the hope, to build capacity so that they don't need me every time. And when that happens, it's awesome. Yeah. But it needs to happen more.
Do you foresee a day where that could possibly happen, or is turnover just too great in your neck of the woods, where it's like, oh man, I just spent an entire year working with these paraprofessionals and this teacher, and now they're gone, and I got to start all over, and this kid's got to start.
It happens. I just had that exact situation where I did this, kind of formal coaching procedure, and 2 of the IAs left after it was almost done, and that happened. That's the nature of, with folks that are paraprofessionals, they're not paid well enough, and these classrooms can be really challenging. So we do see a lot of turnover. I think what is really going to be key is that even if we can't necessarily train the paraprofessionals as well, I think if we can really, really sufficiently train the teacher, that they then can be can be models for their own paraprofessionals. If they have a big giant core board in the front of their room and they're using it, the paraprofessionals that come into that room are going to pick that up. We pick up language because we're immersed. So if the teacher is immersing the paraprofessionals and the students, I think the paraprofessionals will get it. So I do think, I think paraprofessional training is awesome. I think that it may be even more key to make sure because the teacher role, they're more likely to be stable and not having turnover. I think that's even more crucial. But I always, not only do I want to train paraprofessionals, whenever possible, I want parents and siblings. I mean, siblings can be incredibly powerful.
You made the comment about how challenging these classrooms can be. I can't imagine doing anything else. I mean, do you feel like sometimes, like I know for my part, when I take interns, they always end up getting into grad school and then I'm disappointed, but that's great. I want them, but these are folks that are actually changing careers. What you've seen?
You mean the turnover?
Yeah, right.
Not necessarily. I mean, sometimes, I've been in certain classrooms where, some of our kids have behaviors and those behaviors can be very challenging. And the folks that are coming through as paraprofessionals really have no prior training. They have their clearances. But they really have no training in education, no training in special education, no training in augmentative communication. And unless they really have this intuitive knack and love for the amount of pay that paraprofessionals can receive for how challenging some of these, the behaviors that exist with some of those kiddos, they can just bolt. Yeah. It just gets to be too much for some of these folks, and they go elsewhere to look for a job.
I think that's part of the hidden benefit of the training that you're offering, this kind of ongoing support, is the idea that right now, I don't even know what I'm doing when I come to this classroom. All I'm doing is trying to manage behaviors. But then you come in and you start providing some sort of ongoing support and training, and now you're heading in a direction and there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
And it's by no means am I at the point where I feel that this is perfect. So I don't want you to think that I'm, it is something that I am moving towards, that I have started doing with a couple teams. And when I have been able to actually implement a true coaching module or model, however you want to call it, there is an absolute difference in the way that these folks are able to model for these. I mean, it is unmistakable.
But beyond the benefits for the students, maybe there's benefits for those adults. Like I suddenly feel worth in what I'm doing because I didn't know what the heck I was doing before. I just knew I was waiting to try and not wait, trying to make sure behavior didn't blow out of proportion. But now I'm teaching, I'm teaching a language, and I can look back at the beginning of the year and say, this kid couldn't do any of this. And now they can. And so I feel really, exactly, rewarding. That's why people tend to do these jobs, right? It's not for the high salaries, it's because they want to help kids,
Exactly.
Right. Well, and that's nice because that leads into one of my questions that I think you'll be fine with this one, but sometimes it's a gotcha. But, tell us about one of the biggest success stories that you've had.
Oh, one of the biggest success stories.
Ooh, it's a gotcha.
I think one of the biggest success stories in terms of looking from beginning to end in how a team has been able to model with a particular student on their device was that I went through this. In this particular case, I used the partner augmented input model, the s'mores model, and it was just not only was I was training the teacher, but I was training the paraprofessionals, and particularly the paraprofessionals, seeing the difference in the way that they were able to interact and talk to this particular student with that student's device and with their system. And just, not only in understanding that how they should model, but also in just the amount of modeling that started happening. Because, towards the end of the process, I'm sitting back a little bit more and giving more feedback rather than me actually modeling. It was quite, and these were paraprofessionals who had very little experience, and it was just, I kind of was hooked after I did the first, really following one of these protocols and seeing the difference. I was hooked. It was a student in, I guess he was in 5th grade last year. Just, marked differences in the way the team was able to support the use of his particular app and just augmentative communication in general. Now, of course, exactly what Chris mentioned, those two IAs both left the classroom.
Lauren, what is driving your practice lately? What is your natural curiosity leading to you? What are you most interested in learning more about right now?
Gosh, my brain is often all over the place, but, I think I am really most interested, especially having a little bit of success with coaching, how can I best support teams? What kinds of, and you talked about documentation earlier, what kinds of forms can I come up with for teams that are super easy for them to kind of take data, and with these protocols, there are forms that come along with them, but is there something that how can I customize them to the way that each of these classrooms runs? Because I think we all know that each classroom is very different. What kind of classroom is it? Is it autistic support? Is it an MDS classroom? If it's autistic support, is it is it an ABA class, or is it is it a competent learner model? Whatever they're following. I mean, I think what I see is the way that we interact with staff in each of these types of classrooms can be very different, and also their receptiveness to our suggestions can be very different based upon the whatever program they're in and the kinds of things that they've been asked to follow. So I think my biggest interest is continuing on this path of, okay, I really have figured out, and it's not just me, through all the things that we read online and all the research that, that aided language is key. And my goal is to continue on this path. How can I deliver to the people that I am supporting the best way for them to learn to do this, and then for them to be able to build capacity so that they can then support people, after I walk out of the room.
Great. That's perfect. And I think you already answered the question I like to answer or ask finally, which is if you could set up a billboard, right, that every SLP could read, what would you put on it?
I really think that it would have to do with language acquisition and the need for modeling. My other two big thoughts in the past couple of years about what is most crucial and what are the biggest challenges I'm seeing in where I am working. One of them is the lack of modeling. The other is the misinterpretation that a child with a couple of words is a verbal child. So that, I don't know, that might be on my, maybe that my billboard, one of my billboards would be, 10 to 20 words does not make your student verbal. You need to be thinking about, how can you augment that while they're continuing to develop their language, their expressive language.
Wait, I want to clarify that, Lauren. Are you saying like it's people will say, well, he's got 10 to 20 words, so therefore he doesn't need any sort of AAC?
Exactly. Yes. Good clarification. Yeah. So I many times I have teachers or even, sometimes administrators, if they have some experience with the child, well, that child is, why would you even consider a device? That child is verbal. But what they're talking about is that child has some natural speech. But in many cases, when I go in, what I find is, yes, the child has some natural speech and it may be very intelligible. However, it may be 90% echolalic, which they're not able to express, what they want to say, when they want to say it, to whom they want to say it. Or it may be that, yes, they have some words, but they've got 10 or 20. We need thousands to be able to express spontaneously what it is that we want to say. So, even if a student has, it's certainly not to say that we always want to support natural speech, and that's our goal, obviously, but we need to above all be making sure that our students have access to communication, and if that means augmenting it, then that's what we need to do until they are able to do what they need to do through their natural speech, if they'll ever get there. Maybe they won't, and maybe they will, and we just keep working and hope that they will, and if not, we're going to give them what they need. Yep.
Expect that they will, right?
Yep. Exactly. That's one of my driving factors is, that we absolutely must presume competence, especially, when I go into classrooms that are multiple disabilities support types of rooms where we have some of our most severely impaired kiddos. I mean, how can you know what, unless you are providing robust vocabulary and you are giving all kinds of experiences, how can you know what's in there? So, we have to presume competence and go forward from there.
Lauren Enders, thank you so much for joining us today. If you go to tech.speechscience.org, you'll be able to find a bunch more information on Lauren, as well as links to her website and her really pretty incredible Pinterest collection. I got to say, it's a source of inspiration even to me, and I'm the least of the Pinteresters. So we'll have all that there, and then please also feel free to contact us either at tech.speechscience.org or tech@speechscience.org, because we'd love to hear your questions and comments. And if you have questions for Laura, we're happy to pass those along as well.
Well, welcome back once again to Talking with Tech. I thought that was an excellent interview. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Lauren's. It really touched on a lot of really important stuff.
I love her, and I just love that interview. I think she's just such a great therapist. I would love to just spend a week alongside her watching her therapy, because I have no doubt that I would be incredibly inspired.
Oh, I'm sure. Absolutely. Lauren she's just an all-around nice person. There's a fun story of years ago, a conference actually called AAC Boot Camp that she and I were both at, and I got really sick the day of. And she stepped in with without even me asking or anything, and gave my presentation for me. So thanks, Lauren. I owe you.
Yeah. That's a really nice thing to do.
I know, with no prep and everything. I mean, that just shows you how much she has to share, right?
Exactly.
So anyway, I mean, we're thrilled to have had her on. We're really excited to hear your thoughts. So please do join us. You can find us on Facebook at Talking with Tech. If you just look around, there's a page and a group, like I said before, as well as on Instagram. Pretty much all the social media. At least I'm an addict, I think. And then we'd love to hear your thoughts by email. Please, feel free to drop us a line, tech@speechscience.org. We're always sharing stuff of our own too, right? I think Rachel, you're probably the day that you're hearing this, Rachel, you're giving a presentation down in California, right?
I am. I will be speaking at CASHA, and the name of my presentation is a mouthful of acronyms. It's Beyond Requesting, AAC for ASD for the SLP.
Nice.
So just like 3 acronyms, no big deal. Really intense. But yeah, I'm really excited to go to Sacramento. I've never been to CASHA actually. So I've been living in California for a few years now and never been to CASHA. So I'm really excited to go and to present and share some knowledge about, implementing and assessing kids with autism for AAC.
Yeah, well, maybe those of you listening, if you're at CASHA too, definitely go bug Rachel. That would make me happy from a distance because I can't go, sadly. But I've never been to CASHA either, and I hear that's one of the real big state conferences. So
yeah, it's actually really big. So hopefully, I'm a little nervous. Maybe I hope there's not too many people watching.
Okay, everybody listening, go. You have to go.
Definitely don't.
Go and heckle. Well, once again, this is Lucas Stuber, joined by Rachel Madel. Thanks so much for listening today to Talking with Tech. Like I said, check us out online. We'd love to hear your thoughts, on Warren and anything else. I'd love to hear your questions as well. And we will talk to you next week.